I always enjoy, I think teaching, I'm learning from students. So it's a two-way process. I learn a lot from my students and they teach me, and that's keep me on my feet, and I really enjoy and I appreciate Paula and all of you guys sending me students and keeping me on my. So, but I like to be very informal talk. Please interrupt me anytime. And so I'm just going to talk about how we try to evaluate these students and how we try to teach them, and what preceptors should try. Not everything is possible with our clinical scenario, like especially in a pediatric practice. I'm a pediatrician, so in this time of the year we are very busy. So maybe like when the students come in summertime, they get more of me talking to them and doing more formal teaching, and during winter time it's more like teaching bites. So we try to do in between and all that, but as a busy clinician, sometimes I feel that I'm not able to teach students the way I want them to. But it's at the end of the rotation, I hope that they have learned enough pediatrics, hopefully. So that's used to do rounds in our MNC. I did my. So I believe in it. Like, I think when I'm teaching, I'm learning. So it's something which is, and that's why I like to teach, because I'm learning when I'm teaching. And objectives, basically, everybody's own style of teaching, and I can say no style is perfect. We all learn. I was doing more didactic teaching initially. I'm trying to do teaching bites and try to make it more informal. So it's you learn with the time, but there's no perfect way of teaching. And so that I cannot say this is the way you should teach. Every preceptor has their own ways, and you learn from students that what's the best way with this student. What's like every student has their own way of reception. So it's. I think clinicians. I think it's very difficult to be a good teacher. I say I may be a good clinician. That's what the patients say, but I don't consider myself a good teacher or great teacher or anyway. Paula was so kind, or she really brag about me, but I'm just I think I try to teach, but I don't consider myself a good teacher. I'm still learning, and it's very difficult to teach students, especially in a busy environment. So we just try to. That's what I try to assess, diagnose, plan, treat. These are the basic corners of teaching when you're teaching in in clinical setting. We have to be passionate. We try to pass on that knowledge which I've learned from my preceptors, my mentors in my residency and medical school. So that I told you, there's no perfect style. There's no most effective. There's all trial and error. You learn with time what works, what doesn't work. Something may work with one student, may not work with another student. So you cannot make it like a cookie style. You have to really improvise yourself with different type of students. So, and we all have our own teaching styles. Okay, these are qualities. I hope I have some of those. But communication skills are, I think this is the backbone and solid fund of knowledge. These two, I think, you should be able to communicate with your students. They should not be scared of you, which Dr. Robert was saying, that if they are scared, they would be not able to ask you questions. They may feel that you may embarrass them. So there should be good communication from the start. You need to let them know that they can ask questions anytime. They can interrupt you anytime during their clinical rotation, and they can ask questions. And physical exam skills or clinical skills, that's what they copy you. So I think that's the base of medical students or nurse practitioner, PA students. All of them, they should have very good clinical skills. So the teacher should be able to assess the skills of these students and see how they are doing it. If they are making any error, they need to tell them in confidence, like not in front of patient. Obviously, that will make the patient feel that the student doesn't know anything. So you have to always teach student in private and try to be open to their ideas. Like I ask the student, that's what I think, but you think there's any other way to manage this patient? Is not getting better on this medicine. So like I like to say how they can think out of the box. Like I'm treating somebody with ear infection, I'm giving him oxal, and then I gave him Augmentin, it's still not better. It's still ear is not cleaning up. So I asked the student, do you think there's any other way to treat this? So I like to always get their ideas and see what they can come up with something out of the box. And he made one of the students said, "Are you sure the patient is getting the medicine? Like patient compliance in pediatrics is, I think, big thing. Like I'm a father, I know how difficult it is to give medicine to the kids. Like I cannot. It's my wife. She gives." So it's like it's not easy to give kids medicine. So and that was a very good point. When we get the good history, child was not taking the medicine. He was just vomiting. Or mother was forgetting to give the medicine. So it's if the child is not taking the medicine, it's not going to get better. So we just keep changing the antibiotic. It's not working, but we need to think out of the box and think what other ways could be that the child is not getting better. So there may be other issues going on at home, environment, and especially when they have a lot of in my practice. Single moms also the kids go to the father on weekends, and the mother forgets to give the medicine. So during when the child is with the father, the child is not taking any medicine, then comes back to mom and without medicine, and then comes back and mother will tell me that child is not getting any better. So there is always compliance issue in pediatrics, which is we have to always have it in the back of our mind. So and this about anything else on this feedback. I think Dr. Roberts talked a lot about that effective feedback. I will be honest, sometimes I try after the patient, but most of the time it's another day when we have time, because if we are really backed up, we don't have time to give feedback. But if they do something, if they, like recently one of my students, he picked up a murmur in the nursery that was awesome, and I told him right away it was a great pickup. So you, like at this stage, if you can pick up a systolic murmur and diagnose, that's awesome. So it's like you have to give feedback right away if possible. That is the best way, and you have to make it a little interesting. And with pediatrics is always interesting. So I don't have to worry about that part, because we have kids from all the ages, from newborn to 28-year-old. I've got a 28-year-old. He doesn't want to go to internal medicine. He's still coming to me. So peds is interesting. I think it's really. That's also like when I started teaching medical students, I was doing more lectures sort of, but now I offer more teaching bites, like in between, like wheezing child. I see a wheezing child yesterday was 6 months old wheezing, and I was asking my medical student what it could be possible, and he said maybe a pneumococcal pneumonia. And then I learned one of my preceptor told me. I never read it in the books, but he told me, and I still remember that it was like 10, 11, 12 years back. And he said, the same case and he said, Mahmood, that the wheezing child never have bacterial pneumonia. And that's what I told him, like it is something you will see in your practice. A child who is wheezing, the chance of bacterial pneumonia is very, 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 very low, it's almost negligible. So wheezing child invariably would have viral pneumonia, or it could rule out foreign body, but to have bacterial pneumonia. So these type of teaching bites which I learned from my preceptors and attending during my residency, what I try to teach them. Like other thing which I tell them about, the sinus infection doesn't develop overnight. Like mothers come to me a lot in the morning, Monday morning. Child has some cough and fever yesterday, and now it's developed sinus infection. So I have to tell them it's not something which develops all of a sudden, like ear infection. It takes time. So ear infection, I have been in problem. Like mothers, I've seen them and they have like ears looks perfect at night. I went to the urgent care or ER and they have the ear infection. And mothers call me next day and pretty upset with me. But ear infection can take 30 minutes. It like ears would be perfect, and by an hour or so that child would have ear infection. So. But sinus infection, it doesn't develop right away. So, like these are teaching bites. I try to talk to the students and to generate their interest. And if we see something interesting, like I have a case of Dapper-Cott syndrome, which is not very common, and that student did a workup and case study, and he's going to have it published in one of the journals. Because I googled it, it was like few cases reported of Dapper-Cott syndrome. Fetal Dapper-Cott syndrome. That child, a mother was taking Dapper-Cott during pregnancy, and the child has a lot of psychological issues, mental retardation, and So it was something which that child has been through all the specialists and nobody has thought about that. And then when I went through the literature and that medical student, he did research on it, and he's now going to publish that article hopefully. So it's like basically that's what I say. I learn from the students all the time. That and you have to balance clinical and teaching responsibilities. Some of my patients, there are very few of them. I will say less than 1%. They don't want the students to be in the room, and we just have to write it on the chart. But we have to just let the student know that his mother just because the thing is in private practice, you have first the student, the patient is child is a toddler, especially crying 2-3-year-old child is first seen by the nurse, then the student, then the doctor. So it's like that mother sometimes they are stressed out already, not have a good night with the child is like crying all night. So those cases we try to have the other student go with the nurse, or if that mother doesn't want, we just let the student don't see that child. And because that's one drawback in private practice, which in a teaching hospital, patients they cannot say we cannot have a student, because they have to be seen by the residents and medical students. In private practice, the patients have the right. So that's one thing which, but fortunately in my practice, I can count on the finger there are very few parents. And feedback we already talked about. So these also the qualities which we should try to have answer their questions and open to their ideas. Feedback, and motivation. These are the things which I try to. And luckily, all the students which come to my office, they are already very motivated. Coming from Atlanta to driving all the way to Jasper is quite a drive, so they must be motivated to come to my office. So yeah, so that is never a factor. They are always motivated. For me, it's an honor, and I will talk about the different styles, but I think my style is more collaborative and suggestive style, and very few didactic lectures. I make the students, they present cases once a week and on common topics, and try to come up with puzzles, and they do presentations of those. And luckily, when I have 2 or 3 students, then we have more fun in doing those presentations. If I have only 1 student, then those didactic lectures really doesn't, just me talking to him, which doesn't make any sense. So the social process also is like really you have to make it not only community, because if you make it just a dry, students they start getting bored. So you have to keep the fun part in it, and we try to if the weather is good or it's summertime, at lunchtime we are very good. If you've been to Jasper, there's a duck pond. It's beautiful. We sometimes do go and have lunch with the medical students there, so it's a nice place to go. And we have Emigura Falls, which is a nice place. If we have time on Friday, we close early. We sometimes go there. So it's like we need to keep it fluid. Sorry, this volume is not going, so we are keep hearing the clapping. So this is different to like teaching still, and for that I would take my son, who's 6-year-old, and I could teach him. It's basically he's dependent on me. He will do whatever I want him to do, and I'm the expert. I'm the authority. I tell him that that's why. He said why. I said because I said so. You have to do it. So there is no argument. But when you're teaching adults, it's like you're just guiding them. It's not like you are not really holding the finger and teaching them. So it's to guide them, how to do different methods, clinical skills, how to evaluate a patient, how to come up with a DD, with a management plan. So it's entirely different. You are more like a facilitator instead of a teacher when you're teaching students which are adults. So these are 2 different ways to. So I think when I started teaching medical students in Macon, I was probably more like pedagogy. I was trying more lectures and formal teaching, but very soon I learned that is not the way to go. So now I try mostly being a facilitator, let them teach me more than and give them ideas and teaching bites. They just need some guidance, and they are already like this was like a used to in between patient, like if I have a few minutes and you have seen asthmatic, so let me talk about asthma and management. That would be, but instead of that, I will, if I've seen a patient with like, what are the 7 causes? So we see a lot of food failure to thrive for weight gaining in infants and babies and kids. So we have seen a child who is not gaining weight, his weight is going below 5th percentile. So we come out of the room, we discuss with the mother what need to be done, and then we come out, and then before the next patient, I probably will ask the student, so give me 5 causes of failure to thrive, and come up with like he will come up maybe poor nutrition, cystic fibrosis, chronic diarrhea, maybe mother is not feeding properly, social causes, environmental causes. So that's the way I try to, and then I'll have them read it and come to me and talk about it for 10 minutes next day. So, and that's what I like. It's an important problem, asthma, failure to thrive, and you need to read this topic and tell me more about it tomorrow. Especially we have more students, and I give them some thing to read. And sometimes I like if we have time. In summertime we get a lot of time, so I can ask them. We have seen like these different type of patients, and we'd like to like we have seen some interesting patient like von Willebrand disease. We saw a case of galactosemia a couple of months ago, which is not. I saw one case of galactosemia in my residency of 3 years, and in my practice I've seen only 2 cases of galactosemia. So it's not. So I saw one recently. So it's something which if I see, I try to have all these students look at their patients. So if we have something interesting, we always try to discuss. And that's what I ask them if we have seen some interesting case. So this is basically how to teach adults or teaching andragogy. Like we have to encourage their own self-assessment. They need to give them topic and let them read it, and then you can ask them to present, and then come out with your ideas if you have to give any input. And basically they are always eager to learn, they are enthusiastic, and hands-on experience, like I let them with the parents' permission give shots or doing some procedures like cath, the urine bladder, or sometimes getting urine function. So it's hands-on experience. Unfortunately, in private practice, you're not able to do much of that. We are able to do it more in the ED setting or urgent care, but in private practices, primary care, hands-on experience, something which I think I'm not able to provide enough to my students. That's something which they learn more hands-on during their ED rotation or urgent care, where they are more hands-on. I give them the books which I like, and tell them they need to. I made a folder for my students when they come to my office. I gave it to them for the first day. That is all the topics and all the key things about pediatrics which they are supposed to learn. So I make sure they're reading that journal during that rotation. So they have all the resources, and I've got library of pediatric books, so they always can borrow books from my library anytime. I've lost some books, but at least somebody's reading them. So I think books, even if somebody doesn't return you, at least is using it, is good. It's worth it. So they have about assertive style, which I think doesn't, in private practice, it doesn't really go well. Maybe academic teaching in medical school, users have to give suggestions like, so you think the child has a upper respiratory infection, so how are you going to treat it? And if this, I just tell them like, look, find out there, and if my student is telling me, is it like a cold, or what basis you're saying it is a cold or just a virus, why you're not saying it's a bacterial infection, and find out what he is coming up with the reasoning. So, and then I can give my reasoning like it, because it's only 2-3 days. We try to follow the 10-day rule for sinus infection, or after 7 days if it's getting worse. So if it's something which child is immunocompromised, then we try to be more aggressive. So try to get their ideas, and sometimes if we have somebody with depression, we see a lot of teenagers with depression, and we have to assume a facilitative role, try to be empathetic with that patient, try to encourage them, try to have them open their feelings, because a lot of these teenagers, they don't open up. It takes them time. So a lot of time I have to have the mother or father get out of the room, and then I talk to them, and it's like, it takes time to get a confidence level of a teenager. They don't easily trust you. So it takes time. Fortunately, a lot of my teenagers are those which I'm seeing for a long time now, so they trust me. It's like if you're in the ED, it's impossible to really teenagers telling you the truth. What my teacher used to tell me, like, Raza, whatever teenagers say you in your office and clinic, you cannot take it for granted because most of the time they will not be telling you the truth. So it's so you have to really make sure the teenager is, whenever you're seeing a young man or woman, you need to find out whether they are telling you the exact story or not. So there's like some examples of teaching styles. There's like assertive style which I use in between patients. So when I'm seeing a patient, I've seen a patient of blood infection. So I will say, okay, Dr. M, what do you think? What's the drug of choice for UTI? And he will say, okay, amoxil, and I will say amoxil is good, but it's a lot of resistance to E. coli, so I think Bactrim will be a better choice. So that's like, in my experience, that's more like collaborative or facilitative style. You're trying to give them your opinion, but you're not dogmatic. You don't say, no, you're wrong. You always say there's an option, but now with the studies going on, there's increasing resistance going on with amoxil, so maybe Bactrim would be a better choice. That's more like suggestive style. And then you can, if somebody's, one of the students telling me that this child has got ear infection otitis media, then I will ask him, how did you come to that diagnosis? He may tell me he's got eardrum was red, it was bulging, it was painful, I cannot, when I tried to insufflate, it didn't move. So like, to find out how they come up with their diagnosis plan, and you just have to see their thinking channels are in the right directions or not. So that's more like collaborative style, which I think is better. You just try to find out how they come up with their diagnosis, what's their thinking process. So I think facilitative and collaborative style do work in clinical settings instead of assertive style, which does have its own value, but you have to really use all of them in between. So your diagnosis is UTI, what you recommend, so and why? So it's more like collaborative style. Still, you are trying to get their input. Now you try. So somebody who has pneumonia, you are making a clinical diagnosis of pneumonia. We do it clinical pneumonia. So I'm asking, like, we're treating him for possible bacterial pneumonia, or walking pneumonia, or mycoplasma pneumonia. What if you do the X-ray? They're normal. What do you change your diagnosis? What do you want to do? And see what his input, like he may come up with that. And the X-ray may take some time to show the changes, or we may follow him up tomorrow and see how does he do. So it's like a sort of collaborating style, which I think, I don't know, their preceptors here, they use that style, or that's what I think it does work well in clinical settings. In newborn, I always talk to my students what is most important, like you never listen to the heart, you never find anything on auscultation of chest if the baby is not in a respiratory distress. But you will find heart murmurs easily, you will find congenital anomalies. So a lot of things which you learn from the baby is just by looking at the baby and see how the baby looks like, the color, activity level, moving all the extremities. So you need to tell them this is a newborn. Just forget you are doing internal medicine or geriatrics. It's a newborn. You have to entirely different mindset when you're seeing a newborn as compared to seeing an adult. And that's what I tell them first. That now you're in pediatric office, so forget what you've seen in internal medicine, OB and geriatrics, because newborns is an entirely different ballgame. So it's you learn a lot just by looking at a newborn, then by the time is going around. Also, I think our patient's pacing.
Yeah.
Okay, this is like I read this in a journal that we are not really doing good job in assessing the students doing their history and physical. Only 46% were never observed. 20% never observed doing a physical by the preceptor. So unless we are observing them, we cannot really provide good feedback. So, and I understand with time limitation, we are not able to, especially if we have 2-3 students, it's not able to really observe all of them. But without observations, you cannot really give a good feedback. Feedback is feedback. Feedback is what I think main background. you have to, like, if somebody is doing I give the example of the hip exam, which is a little tricky in newborns. So you have to show them how to do a hip exam and in newborn. Then you can like just keep telling them how to do it. It is not really, students not going to catch it. You have to show how you do it, and then they will be able to do it. So basically, what they say: teach one, do one, teach one, and what's the third one? See one, do one, teach one. So evaluation, like there's two different ways. I think that we already went through. Dr. Roberts already read it. And goes evaluation. I will just go through this. That's what I would like to go through. Like this is started by Dr. Pangero, endocrinologist, and there are 4 types of medical students reporter. I tell them like first week. They are reporters, they are telling you the history, they are really not coming up with some assessment or management plan. They're good historians, and they're able to use the proper terminology for medical terms, but I'm not expecting them to be a interpreter like if white count is high, what it does it mean, if child has not urinated for 12 hours, what does it mean, so they are just reporting. Second week, I expect those students to be interpreter. They should be able to prioritize if the child has come with 5 problems. What is the number 1 problem? Shortness of breath is more important than somebody the child with a rash. Like if he has multiple problems, you have to prioritize which is more important to look at this time. I have patients which they are telling me about the rash, and when I listen to the lungs, they have clinical pneumonia. So basically, you have to prioritize which is more important and which can hurt the child. So that is second week. They should be able to come up with some diagnosis, some answer why question, why not this, why not this. And third week they should be, and these are students which they should be able to come up with a management plan, which I tell them by third week you should be giving me a management. First week I assess them for history taking. Second week clinical exams. Third week I assess them for their management and skills and how they teach the family. And so that's like a manager, they should be able to answer management question, why we are giving this antibody, why not this, what could be the side effects. They should have come up with a therapeutic plan, and they should be able to back up with some literature, and they should be citing some evidence. That's how I learn from the students when they come up with some citations. And so, and that is like pinnacle, that's the top. If that student is telling me new therapies, new tests, anything which come up recently in the literature, doing good education to the student, that is, I think that the student gets A++. That is like an example, like if he first rotation, he can tell me abdominal hemoglobin, and that is A+, like he's able to say maybe a GI bleed. Management, we need to do a GI workup, then educate himself and other students by looking at different diagnoses, possibly somebody with a GI bleed. So if somebody by the 3rd or 4th week is still a reporter, then I think I'm doing something wrong. I'm not really stretching them fully, and I need to evaluate that student. Should not go by 3rd week, should be able to, by 2nd week, that student should be able to start doing some interpretation of history and physical exam. So if it's still by the end of the third or 4th week they are doing that, I don't have any C students so far. So I don't know, but there may be some C students. I'm fortunate I get very, very, very good students. So they all A and maybe a couple of B, but mostly they are A's. And feedback, again, that's feedback we have to provide as soon as possible. And basically, like I'm more in busy clinical setting, you just have to, if we are interesting rash with a child with URI, just forget about URI or colds or reinfection, focus on the rash, which is not so common, and then talk about that thing instead of, so you have to be pretty selective in your teaching. Otherwise, you really in busy practice, you cannot teach everything. So you have to teach what you think they're not going to see a lot. They are going to see a lot of upper respiratory infection or trisomia, but they are not going to see a lot of galactosemias and a lot of von Willebrand disease. So if anything interesting, you need to focus on that. in between patient discussion and another day, and observation I do not a lot. I will just do it maybe once a week or twice a week, because student they get really nervous when they know that. So you have to do it really very, like while you're looking at the patient chart, you're observing the student also. So these like how they go up. First they just know when they start, then know how, then they know how to do it, then they're doing all this. So this is like a pyramid of clinical competence. Once again, there are different styles. I like rhyme method and teaching bites, and but every preceptor has their own ways to teach. Bottom line is we have to come up, improvise our teaching to the student level, and whatever we have to see this student, this method will work with this student, this method will work with that student. So you cannot be dogmatic with your teaching style.